This episode is brought to you by Alumni Q. For over 20 years, Alumni Q has been partnering with higher education institutions to build real, lasting connections that drive engagement, whether through events, volunteer management, or personalized fundraising strategies. Their software is designed to meet busy, accomplished alumni where they are, making it easier to connect, communicate, and involve them in meaningful ways. From personalized event experiences to targeted communications, Alumni Q ensures your constituents feel seen and valued. With 96% of clients staying with them long-term, Alumni Q's active support and responsive development make sure you always have the tools you need when you need them. If you're looking for a trusted partner that truly understands higher education and is committed to helping your institution succeed, consider Alumni Q, powering the connections that last. Visit alumniq.com to learn more. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for listening to Alumless World for April 4th, 2025. This is the Alumni Engagement in a Politically Complex Landscape edition. On Alumless World, we talk about constituent engagement strategies and education advancement from a global perspective. And we try to take a broader view of advancement and how colleges, universities, international schools, and independent schools are working to build a culture of engagement and philanthropy. I'm Ryan Catherwood, and I am joined by my fantastic Alumless World co-host, Nicole Kempton. Nicole, what's going on?
Hey, Ryan. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Happy Friday. You've been on the road and I'm back from vacation. All I did for a week in Mexico with the family was sleep and eat and look out at the ocean. So I'm back feeling pretty rested and recharged. And you were traveling too, and then you're on the road again, right?
Yeah, I'm headed to Spain for a few days, so pretty excited about that.
That's going to be awesome. Little family vacay. Nicole and I are both consultants with Chris Marshall Advancement Consulting. I live in the US. Nicole's based in London. And we publish a new episode of Alumless World every other Friday at 11:30 a.m. GMT. And then we broadcast a 30-minute show on LinkedIn and YouTube to go with it. There's an additional 30-minute bonus segment available only on a podcast feed of Alumless World. So if you're listening to the podcast, we appreciate you adding us to your feed. And we invite you to follow us on Chris Marshall Advancement Consulting on LinkedIn. We're also grateful. Oh, that's Nicole, that's your line.
Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to thank our sponsor. So we're really grateful to Steve Rittler and the team at Alumni Q for being the presenting sponsor for this episode and for many Alumless World episodes. So thank you to them.
Awesome.
And I'll go ahead and maybe introduce our guest for today. So we're really excited to have Serge Sych with us. Serge is a senior lecturer in leadership and stakeholder engagement at the International Business School in Budapest, Hungary, where I just was a few days ago, and a former vice president of Alumni Relations at Central European University. And Serge has built advancement organizations from the ground up at several institutions and has also been involved in CASE and EAIE as a board member and a faculty member. So lots to talk about. So maybe we can say hello to Serge. Now he's out on the stage with us. Hi.
Hi, guys. Hi, Ryan. Hi, Nicole. Good to be with you folks.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So maybe we can start, Serge, with, can you tell us a little bit about you and how you got involved in advancement work and what were some kind of key moments in your career?
Yep, I can count three. So I'll share with you 3 moments in my career. First one, when I was a student here at CU in Budapest, and my wife was pregnant with our first to-be-born son, we urgently realized that, being youngsters, we didn't realize we missed health insurance. And as a full-time student, I couldn't afford private. So I needed a job badly. And working on campus, looking around and finding one post which was saying Alumni Relations Coordinator, That was my job. That was my first, pivotal moment in my career when I became what I later call accidental professional. Second was a few years in the ropes already doing great. And then our institution went through budget and staff cuts, and realization that we can survive, or we can actually provide our clients with the same type of services as before by integrating some services. And we did integrate it, alumni relations and career services. And that was my first integration pilot. And thirdly, already down the road, like 10 years ago, again, institution went through difficult time with student enrollment. Our application numbers were going down few years in a row. An idea came that we can leverage alumni engagement strongly in the area of especially student recruitment and international student recruitment. And that allowed me to start a new kind of concept and model, integrating alumni into the entire student journey, from student marketing and recruitment to fundraising and donor relations. 3 moments in my career that really dramatically changed the direction of my career.
I love that. Accidental professional.
And what an amazing sort of set of experiences to begin your career. Of course, no one plans a career in our space, I don't think. And it sounds like yours was similarly founded, but you sort of embraced it. And then you did your dissertation on the construction of professional identities in alumni relations. So not only were you practicing, you were studying. And what findings surprised you the most about how these professionals view themselves in their work?
I think in that moment in time, I thought that, I was unique in a way. Or, of course, I heard during case conferences that we all end up here somewhat, in this profession accidentally. But that my research, supported that or reinforced that thesis. So that was Accidental Professionals Club, if you will. Something that I was surprised about more was relatively high longevity in this professional field. After a certain period of time, let's say nowadays it can be probably 2 or 3, the people, even in a wider advancement area, would change the, if not entire industries, but maybe their trajectory somewhat. And alumni relations professionals, based on my study, were actually more likely than not to stay in this professional area for much longer. And third one, it's something was surprising, but again, maybe logical, expected in a way, that there was some tension between kind of a dual affiliation or loyalty, if you will, to employing institution and to our alumni base, right? Or to stakeholders that we take care of. And that was this duality sometimes was appreciated and well played out. And sometimes it was difficult for fellow professionals to handle this both, especially in times of crisis. So that was kind of 3 things that I really found interesting.
Did it sort of change how you were thinking about the work that you were doing at the time as you were sort of coming to these realizations?
Well, first of all, I thought that, I stay long enough in my job, then I probably go to the segment of loyal people. But at the same time, my career trajectory was somewhat different because I was lucky, and I feel lucky to start in alumni relations. So my journey in advancement started from alumni relations, but then it went through the entire student journey. And in that moment, if I would retroactively look, back and say where I would be, I don't know whether I would be still doing alumni relations after 25 or 30 years. So for me, that was kind of like, okay, reflection on my career journey and feeling lucky that I started with alumni relations.
Yeah. I can definitely pinpoint even a moment where I said to myself, okay, I like this alumni relations thing. It's fun. It's meaningful. I like higher ed, and why don't I just, go for it? And, it felt like there was a lot of space within the world of alumni engagement to, chart new territory and to make an impact. So I think I sort of had similar moments along the way. Nicole, you probably did as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, I didn't know that jobs like ours existed when I was a graduate student, and I thought I wanted to be an academic, and kind of realized that I'm so curious about universities as institutions and kind of the organizational psychology of universities, and how alumni networks work. And but I didn't even know that this was a profession, right? And I think so many people, that happens for so many people. And I remember also having that similar aha moment in my first job at Duke at the business school, thinking like, this is really cool. And I think I want to do this now for the rest of my career. So yeah. And we had a lot of long timers too. We had regularly, remember we used to have a milestone ceremony. We'd have people who'd been working at the business school for 30 years, 35 years, and so, yeah, that tracks. Everything that you're saying is definitely been true in my workplaces.
So I think I remember us first connecting, back when I worked at the University of Virginia, which was, it's now some time ago. And you've really been recognized as pioneering an integrated alumni relations model in Europe. And can you sort of explain how the alumni relations model in Europe, maybe how it might be different than approaches in the United States? And I know this is sort of a central sort of theme that we try to discuss on the podcast.
Well, so what I call my model, but basically it's not really my model, but so the model that I'm practicing or have been practicing is basically embedding alumni engagement in the very, if in most, if not all aspects of university life. However, boldly it might sound, right? So it's certainly throughout the student journey. And at CU, for instance, I was able to do it with my teams by formally integrating professional functions from student marketing, from student recruitment, admissions, financial aid, student services, career services, alumni, and donors relations. Now, so in a way, I even don't know whether it was some sort of organic luck that I was able to practice it and to experiment, if you will. And it's not a typical, because kind of road or model. And later at other institutions that were not positioned there or had different institutional models, I basically tried to do the same with very few resources and staff members, just by embodying alumni engagement into as many aspects of work within an institution as possible, and actually educating communities. So primarily going to people without formal status, without formal mandate to integrate functions and to join forces, have a joint budget, but primarily focusing probably on joint kind of operational activities and actually on joint KPIs. So persuading them, if you will, that if you include us, if you include alumni in student marketing, in student life, and student clubs, in whatever, donors relations, corporate relations, employers relations, you will benefit in this aspect. And actually this particular KPI will be great for you and for us. And so that in a way was a second edition of something that I practiced full-fledged during many years. Then I did it at other institutions. And if I compare it to, I don't want to, again, to say maybe typical, but more frequently found model where alumni engagement would be kind of localized within an institution. And then let's say it can be, of course, part of advancement. It can be part of development, somewhat subordinate to fundraising, and more predominantly in Europe can be seen as a part of external relations or international relations, and then with very few resources available. So that's kind of more typical model here.
Yeah, I used to have a colleague who said that alumni engagement should be a function of the university and not a department of the university. And I think that's, I love how you described how you've found the joint benefit for so many different parts of the institution, and that benefits the alumni community and the institution itself. So let's talk a little bit about the culture of philanthropy, because you, in addition to creating this integrated model, which is quite innovative. You also created the first annual fund and reunion program in Central Europe. So I'd love to hear kind of what challenges you faced in starting that from scratch, and kind of how you went about building a culture of philanthropy where there wasn't necessarily one before.
Yeah, I think, as the saying goes, fundraising is more about culture of asking than a tradition of giving, and that's what I found also to be a reality in my context. So students and alumni were coming from more than 140 countries.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and that was when we started the alumni giving in this part of the world. Most of them were coming from state-funded institutions. We did have Americans and we did have Canadians and Brits. That's all right. But the ratio of the students and alumni otherwise were smaller than the rest. And it was the end of late 90s and then early 2000. And, financial situation in many countries were not very stable. So,
Mm-hmm.
And plus philanthropy was not, and still probably not, a well-known concept. Let's say, even not probably very common practice. And that's probably even more important than just to understand the word, what philanthropy means.
Mm-hmm.
And so giving was limited in most of the places that our students and alumni coming from, and primarily directed probably towards some religious causes. And so finding a common thread that would rather unite such a diversity was a challenge. And we did it. And so basically, I would say it was based on kind of more humanistic approach. So we had,
Mm-hmm.
I recall that it was based around gratitude, respect, paying it forward, and humanity. And our first reunion giving campaign was basically centered around gift honoring the founder's birthday anniversary, and was directed toward the alumni scholarships for students, basically. So, and that year, our participation rate was 30%. And so I felt it was a good start, especially keeping in mind that the alumni board that was set up for the campaign was completely kind of, they didn't know. No one knew how it will turn out, and many people were believed that we would be criticized and we would be booed, and then our alumni and students would say, "Go to hell." It's not something we would like to do, and that was a big surprise.
I guess one of the questions I've had while you've been talking, Serge, is like, how much skepticism did you meet along these conversations around education? And then you've sort of hinted that the board may have been skeptical, and I guess on your way to kind of shining a light on the importance of alumni across all of the institution's key metrics and stakeholder groups, where you met with a lot of resistance.
There was a lot of resistance, but there's always two forces at play. We had a lot of resistance, and we had some sort of push for the institution to show NCU is an American institution in Europe, and therefore it was felt that why we cannot do the same as our colleagues across the ocean. But again, our alumni body and our pool of our prospects was very far from a typical American university pool, and I think the fear, and I was really anxious about this, because I think the worst case scenario, we would have an announced anniversary gift, and then there is a founder, and we have a major event, and we have a nice check issued. And then we have people who are really protesting it, and we were as close to that possibility as it could be, and therefore, So that was really a lot of resistance. But what happened afterwards was even more important, because we thought that would be one-off. We didn't plan to continue. We wanted to pilot it. And what happened? We didn't ask for a few months afterwards. In fact, next year we didn't even plan for a giving. And what happened, that a lot of people started to ask how we can donate. And that was a pivot moment. Wow. Not actually the initial success, but actually half a year down the road, alumni started to ask. what about this year campaign? How we can give? And that was just like, wow.
That must have been so rewarding to you
Yeah.
as a leader, like, having navigated through that uncertainty around whether this is going to be a success or not. That's cool. So let's make sure. I want to make sure in the first half of our time here during the LinkedIn broadcast, we get to talk about CEU's forced relocation from Budapest to Vienna. Some of our listeners may not know a whole lot about this and kind of what happened. So maybe you can shed some light on that, and then just talk about how this political challenge kind of affected your approach to alumni engagement and kind of what unfolded as a result of all of this.
I even don't know how to put it in kind of in a comprised form. CEU, as an American institution, was founded by George Soros, and the institution found itself in the middle of political crisis when the Hungarian government basically decided that they would use the founder primarily. The university was kind of secondary target, if you will, as an enemy of the state, and there was a lot of political campaigning. But one element of it was that the government, or rather the parliament that was majority of ruling party, basically made a legislative act that didn't allow anymore the university to issue U.S. degrees, so making it de facto local Hungarian university with a lot of other aspects related to how this will be kind of affected, how this will affect the institutional life. And the institution started to fight, and we had different approaches toward that, kind of trying to minimize the damage, trying to speak and negotiate with the government. And it took some time. It was right before COVID pandemic, like a year or two. And then, so we had crisis after crisis anyway. And then when we saw that it didn't work out, the decision was that actually we need to make it now relevant to those people who care about higher education, for instance, and academic freedom. Because indeed it was a attack on academic freedom in Europe, and it was first time since the Second World War. And it was really dramatic. And then that was a pivotal moment for us, because from a local nuanced problem, it became something that inspired a lot of people around the world, not both in Budapest, where we saw people marching on the streets of the city, not necessarily supporting CEU directly, saying we support that institution, but they were supporting academic freedom and higher education and the role of higher education in society, and that was huge.
And you and I mean, you had to navigate through all of that again, to kind of keep the ship steady through that crisis. How did you do it?
So we basically, there was an initial decision again. So we try to minimize damage and do it kind of, we try to negotiate. When we thought that negotiation is not working, and there was a crisis, first response team was set up. It was headed by the university president, Michael Ignatieff, in that time. And I think it was his strategic vision of making this fight, not our own fight, but fight for a bigger cause. And that would allow us, in terms of engagement of stakeholders, both alumni, but partners and donors at large, to leverage something that we thought would be very sensitive and risky enterprise for the university, because we were getting close to be expelled from, if you will, from a country, and starting to look for another location across the border. So both financial, reputational, and but all other aspects became really enormous. And so to get support from our stakeholders, alumni specifically, we had to show that we are strong together and we need their support. And that was a fear, I would say, that was shared by many, that being in such a risky and unpredictable waters, we might not have as much support from alumni, especially in maybe politically exposed countries, or from particular partners. But we were wrong, thankfully. There was a lot of support. And interestingly enough, so that support was diversified. It was much more diverse, because in the past we would look at, okay, there was philanthropic support and volunteer engagement. Here, we got into lobbying and advocacy. And if you would see videos that, span across that time, you could see Tbilisi, Washington, London, Brussels, where we had alumni, and some of them were ambassadors and representatives of big parties and business people protesting or supporting CU, depending who was there.
There was a protest, right, that resulted from that, a march in support of CEU and academic freedom more broadly. And can you talk about the sequence that occurred to that and the march itself, and what was the impact on the university?
Yeah, this mobilizing factor was in a way like a gift for us. We didn't expect, because again, in Budapest, CEU was perceived as an elite institution, well-funded, and kind of not a peer institution, but something for elite, which was very stereotypical and not right, because indeed CEU was and is probably one of the most diverse institutions in terms of not only nationalities, but also backgrounds and underprivileged groups that would be represented on campus. So there was no expectation that we would have, hundreds of thousands of people marching on the streets of Budapest to support the university. There was expectation there would be some politically, mature people would support the institution. But again, by moving the needle in the direction of this is your fight. So making a local crisis, making a fight for a bigger cause, made us actually realize the dream of uniting many people who would like to support something bigger than their kind of small local cause. And that march, and there were many other occasions when citizens of Budapest and many people who were coming from outside of the capital were supporting institutions, were supporting academic freedom, and they were making it more of a fight for themselves. So that was our kind of lessons that we learned, and then that was kind of our approach in that time.
Yeah, it's quite a remarkable moment in your history and in world history, really. But we're in a moment here in the United States, right, with considerable attacks on higher education here, and selecting specific institutions to go after for various reasons. And obviously the George Soros connection has been for a long time kind of an attack point of sort of the globalist education elite, right? And we see it here in the United States. It is not a problem unique to Hungary, of course. And but it seems like you were all sort of tackling these challenges maybe first, right? And hopefully we can learn from you all about how to mobilize alumni and utilize alumni, broadly speaking, as a voice for the importance of alumni in higher education in general, right? So it's an incredibly important moment, and thank you for sharing those thoughts. All right, so what we're going to do, Nicole, is we're going to transition over to our bonus segment with Serge, and we'll be back after we take a short break and hear from our sponsor, Alumni Q. But maybe you can tease our upcoming guests before we leave the folks on LinkedIn and YouTube.
Yeah, so next week on Alumless, we have Jeff Williams from the University of Maryland Foundation. And then in 2 weeks on Alumless World, we'll hear from Hannah Fox of Regents University and Marie-Rose Dalazone from the Sutton Trust. And Hannah and Marie-Rose actually have a podcast as well called Trials and Errors, where they talk about failure in advancement, which is something that we don't usually mention. And so that should be a really interesting conversation. And if you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to subscribe to the podcast feed for both Alumless and Alumless World. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a nice review, because that helps us a lot. So I think we'll sign off now and see you in the bonus segment.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, folks.